I'll feed anybody, but I'm not for everybody. My name is Chef Derek Green, and I find people that have turned their life's experiences into ingredients they use to feed others. We're redefining soul food. These people have turned their adversities into their advantages. This is the Sauce of Life show, and let's go. Dr. Pamela Barela, welcome to the Sauce of Life.
Thank you, Derek Green.
So this podcast is about people that have taken their life's experiences and turned those into ingredients that they now use to feed others. You have an amazing story, an amazing life, and are now changing lives. So with that being said, Pam, please introduce yourself.
So my name is Dr. Pam Barela. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Oregon, which means I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And then I have a PhD in clinical sex, which, if you want to get into it, means I am an expert on all things gender, identity, sexuality related, which means if you want to learn how to have better sex, you give me a call. If you have erectile dysfunction and you want help with that, you give me a call. If you want to explore your own sexuality, you give me a call. I don't strictly work in just the sex arena. I work with individuals and couples related to all kinds of mental health issues. So that's kind of my jam.
Awesome. Let's get going. When I first met you, you were in Sitka, Alaska.
Let's clarify. We met on a plane.
En route to Sitka, Alaska.
En route to Sitka, Alaska.
Yeah. And you met me at one of the roughest parts of my life because my wife was at the time battling for her life as she underwent chemotherapy. What got you to Sitka? And I just want to know more about your background. It's cool that you're the sex doctor now. We're going to get to that part. But
we're going to get there. We met in October of 2010. So we have been friends for nearly 15 years now, over 14. And we met at what was one of the roughest stages in my life also. I had left my husband. I had been in a marriage. I met someone in 2004. We got married in 2006, had a daughter in 2007. And in March of 2010, I left that relationship. Being married, being in that relationship, I didn't like myself a whole lot. I had no self-esteem, no self-worth, no self-confidence. And it took a while before I was even able to identify that the relationship I was in was abusive. One of the kind of light bulb moments in that relationship was my 11-year-old stepson saying to me, "Hey, Pam, I'm sorry Dad's so mean to you," while I was driving him to school. And I was like, dang it. I don't want the kids to think that this is a way that a man should treat his wife. And if the kid is seeing it, being here isn't helping. And it took me a little bit longer to put all of the, things into place. And on my 30th birthday, literally the day of my 30th birthday, with the help of my parents buying me a plane ticket and giving me a place to live because I was not working at the time. I was a stay-at-home mom of a almost 2-year-old. I jumped on a plane and I went back to Alaska with my daughter. My ex-husband filed in court for custody and for divorce and all those things. And, the courts did what the courts do and ordered that I send her back to Oregon, which meant I went from being a stay-at-home mom to the most amazing daughter ever to having lost my daughter and being a vacation parent. So there was not only coming out of an abusive relationship, but then also my whole identity of being this person's mom was stripped and gone. And what kind of mom, what kind of woman loses her child? And so I was really, I'm not naturally a depressed person. I've never been suicidal, but I was questioning everything about me. And so it took a lot of time and therapy and working on me and looking at what the absolute truths of my life were and figuring out what I'm going to do. So there were times that I was working 3 jobs to get debt free to, I left him and I had 2 totes of clothes and some clothes for my daughter. And I, needed to find a place to live, and I needed a vehicle to drive, and I had a job offer right away, but I didn't have childcare, so trying to just really get on the move and make a life for myself and my daughter. I have always been the person in life who friends reached out to me for, to be that phone a friend person. And one of my closest and dearest friends is a therapist, and he would call me when things were hard for him. And I was like, dang, if this person who I think is crazy smart will call me when he needs somebody to talk to, maybe I could do this. Maybe this could be my job. And so I got a second bachelor's degree. I got my master's degree, and I just kept pursuing everything that was going to provide, a life for me. I sought out specializations in sex therapy. I sought out specializations in treatment of trauma. And in that, in learning and helping others, it was so healing to me. And that's how I got here.
Man, you just packed so much into that. Thank you.
That's the quick overview of how I got here.
No, it's amazing because, as I said, this is about people that have taken their life's experiences and turned them into things that they now use to feed others. And you are one of those walking epitomes of that, because you literally took the pain and the traumas of your early adulthood and some of what your childhood was. And now people sit in your office and they come to you for help, and you're changing lives. And it's a beautiful thing. You're not just changing lives of your clients, you're also changing the lives of other therapists that are coming to you, and you're providing them with the means to be able to change other lives. So it's like you're multiplying your efforts, and that's beautiful. I want to go back for a second, because I met you at that stage where you were the vacationing parent, I believe is the way that you said that. And I remember how traumatic that was for you, that your daughter was in Oregon and you were in Sitka, Alaska, and you're forced to continue trying to co-parent with someone who was very, well, I'll let you talk about that part.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
So I have what is called a high conflict divorce. And in the state of Oregon, there are 2 ways that parents can co-parent, or that we handle custody and visitation. And one is sole custody and one is joint custody. Joint custody is the ideal, right? It's you and your child's other parent. We're getting together, we're collaborating, and we're doing what is necessary for the care and legal responsibilities for this little human. I had a restraining order against my husband, my ex-husband at the time. I was terrified because of the violence in our life, in our marriage. I was terrified, even being 2 states away from him, for my own life and my safety. And you can't have a collaborative marriage with somebody when there's that level of hostility, and you can't co-parent when you're afraid for your own life. And then reasonably so, how do you have a restraining order against the now sole guardian? He became the sole guardian, sole custody person for my daughter. And so it meant a lot of soul searching, but sacrificing, dropping every form of legal means of safety that I felt, so that I could have phone calls with my daughter, so that we could Zoom. And that's really, really hard stuff to do. Yeah.
I remember you struggling because it was essentially like things of your past were able to be leveraged against you. And there's so many parents that face conflicts like this where their partner is more convincing than they are, especially if they're struggling with self-worth issues in court at that time. But I just remember that. But I also remember you having an amazing soul, and you always been a person, even from that first flight, of you being that one to open up. And you're right, people do gravitate to you. So it's a beautiful thing. So eventually you were able to gain custody of your daughter?
Yeah. In 2016, so eventually I left my ex-husband in 2010. I met my now husband, Jeff, who's an amazing human. living in Sitka, and then he was a pilot in the Coast Guard, so we ended up living in Kodiak, Alaska. In 2016, he retired from the Coast Guard, and we moved to where we are now in Astoria, Oregon. When we moved to Astoria, it was really, we did so with really intent and purpose. Like, I don't do anything, and this is part of my trauma. I have all the bucket lists of trauma you can have from my childhood, neatly organized into the little bento box. But my husband has an ex-wife that lives 3 miles down the road. And then I had this ex-husband that lives in the Portland area, which was 2 hours from Astoria. And we needed to, Jeff, my husband, and I needed to figure out how we're going to live, or where we're going to live, because our kids were really our priority. Molly, my daughter, and then his 2 kids that he shares with his ex-wife. And we settled on Astoria, Oregon, because it was closer to his ex-wife, who he has a really decent co-parenting relationship with. And Astoria being 2 hours from Portland, it meant I could see my daughter virtually we had a custody arrangement that let me see her every other weekend, and then all the holidays and weekends. And I just started compiling the notes and the evidence and the data. And, my lawyer was great, and he gave me the really strategic information. And he's like, Pam, when bad things happen to this little kid, my daughter, he's like, you document those, and it's a brick. And we keep track of all those bricks, and eventually we line up a wall. And in 2017, I filed for sole custody, and I lost. And that was another one of the most crushing days. And I later found out that my daughter actually went to talk to the judge that day. And again, classic abusive relationships. Before my daughter went to talk to the judge, her dad said to her, if you say what I think you're going to say, I just want you to know you're going to end up in foster care, and you'll never see your mom or I again. And when you say that to a 10-year-old,
wow,
it doesn't, yeah. And so she said, nope, everything is fine. I'm happy. I live with my dad. And so I lost. And that was a big setback, but it didn't derail me. I kept working and progressing and saving up all those bricks. In 2019, I filed again. And this was right at the COVID time that we all know, right? And courts were backlogged for years. And I think it was October of 21. We went to court in August of 21, and we finally had a ruling in October of 21. My daughter ended up speaking to the judge again. And this time she did tell the judge, she said, yep, when I was here last time, I was scared. And by then she was old enough. And so I am now her sole guardian. She does see her dad every other weekend. They have a good relationship, I'm grateful that she has him in her life. She will be 18 this year. And I am really grateful that we don't have to exchange many emails anymore, because I'm really picky about who I let in my life, and I don't need everyone to have access to me. People in my life, like yourself, are people that feed me and that are good for me, and they are resources and friendships, people that care about me. And I avoid toxicity like the plague. I choose me, and that's been essential.
That's one of the most beautiful transformations that I've seen of you, is how you transformed into this person that chooses you, from this bento box of trauma, as you call it, which I understood because when I went through therapy through EMDR, they helped to compartmentalize. And so having seen you and been a part of your life as you went through these different transformations, it's a beautiful thing. And you do have an awesome human being. You're married to an awesome human being, and you're raising an awesome little human being. So great for that.
I am so incredibly blessed and fortunate. I literally, I say all the time, every once in a while on Facebook, my silly little post will be, I have the best people in my life. And it is so completely true. Like, when we put boundaries up, and I'm the biggest believer in boundaries. Boundaries are what I will allow, and they are the roadblocks and things that I put up to the limits I set for me. You know, they're not rules for you. It doesn't dictate what Derek can do in the world, but it's what I will allow. And I don't allow people in my life to treat me poorly.
That's a beautiful thing. How?
How?
So many people tell you what to do, and you just have said set boundaries, but how does a person set those boundaries?
So it starts with, sometimes it's, and we've all heard the terminology or the phrasing, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So I do EMDR in my office. I'm an EMDR provider. And one of the things that we learn in EMDR school is you have a negative core belief, and then you have a preferred positive belief or an alternative positive. So my negative core belief that I've always wrestled with is I am not enough. And I'm very transparent with that. And I share that because from childhood, I always thought like, wow, if I could swim faster, my parents will come to a swim meet. Or if I had, better grades, or if my waist was tinier. So anything that Pam was not enough. And in evaluating myself, I came to find out that, wow, like all of those things that I thought were flaws, a tinier waist would not have meant that my ex-husband treated me better. My parents being at my swim meet would not have meant that I had a better match, maybe. And so it really took evaluating those things and my preferred positive belief, which is I am okay, or I am good enough as I am. And at the time when I was going through learning this process and things, I didn't believe it. I knew my negative core belief that is ingrained and that it's still there today, only I can quiet that voice. But the positive wasn't true. And so sometimes we have to really sit back and go, okay, I don't believe that I am enough today, but I want to. And we look at ourselves in that mirror and I go, oh, I am enough. And it can feel like a lie. But then you sit around and literally when I went to my graduation for my PhD, that was like a moment that I felt transformed. I was like, wow, I did it. I don't need any of that validation from anywhere else. And I don't mean that to be like a cocky jerk, but it's like, I finally showed up for me and I rescued me. And we're all capable of doing that. It takes a lot. Sometimes it takes having a great therapist or amazing friends to be there to lean on along the way.
I don't think you sound cocky at all. And honestly, success leaves clues. This is something that is a recurring theme in this podcast. I say it almost everyone, success leaves clues. So when I'm asking these questions, I'm looking at a person who has successfully transformed their life from where they were and established self-worth, which, as I have private conversations with many people, this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And even very successful people that you may see on TV or others may have seen on television, as we have private conversations, that's a recurring theme, that self-worth. I am enough or I'm not enough.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to match you here and tell you that I even have it tattooed here.
And I have a tattoo down my side. So when I was a teenager, I was a foreign exchange student in Denmark. I have had "Love Me As I Am" in Danish tattooed down my side for 10 years, maybe more, 10 years probably. And I had it because I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that I am lovable as I am. And it was one of those like it hits me still. It's one of those like look in the mirror moments. And it's like, I want to believe this. And I'm going to cling to it because I know there's this little bit of myself that goes, I am enough. And I am going to be there one day. I have amazing clients and I have a few clients that, they're really amazing business people or members of our community. You're right. It is not an uncommon struggle because we all have trauma, this little seed of trauma that is a roadblock.
I would love, that's amazing that you mentioned seeds. Um, when I'm talking with people in coaching and mentoring, we often talk about the seeds that we're planting into them when they were younger. And that seeds interaction with emotion, having that high emotional event. You as a master, an expert in EMDR, how do you teach people to go back? You specifically teach how to go back and actually identify those seeds.
Yeah.
Because you may have someone that now they call it procrastination, or they say that I don't finish things that I start. But that began with a seed somewhere planted in them.
And sometimes the seed that we can identify and that we see it as, when we get into therapy and we're doing EMDR, for example, we find out, or that client will find out, oh, whoa, that's not what it was. That's not what it was. I have this one, all my clients are amazing. And I could, ethically, what our ethics guidelines say is I can tell you about my clients as long as there's nothing that would identify them to people in the world. And so I love bragging about my clients as much as possible because they're literally the coolest people. And I'm so lucky they enrich my lives. But I have this one client, and he started seeing me maybe a year ago. And he came in from a referral from somebody else that I worked with and done EMDR with for, a chunk of time. And this man sits in my office and he's telling me his story about being homeless and about his substance use and about his trauma. And suddenly it clicked. I can remember. So I lived in Astoria from 04 to 08 with my first husband. And then we moved back in 2016 with my second husband. I can remember, and there was a moment when he was telling me his story and about where he would camp, where he could safely sit during a day. One day, I went to the bank and I was making a deposit. And, they have the free cups of coffee in the bank. I walked by this guy and it said, anything helps, with a sign. I was in my bank and I grabbed a cup of coffee and I stopped and I dropped it off to him. And he was like, thank you. You made my day. And here we are 10 years later, 15 years later, this man is sitting in my office.
Wow.
And he's sharing the most intimate details of his trauma with me, right? And he's recounting family abuse and he's recounting his struggles with substances. And we get into EMDR and the feeling. So EMDR is very feeling and emotion driven. And his brain and what was coming up was, I am alone. And it wasn't the pain of being alone on the streets, but it was from the loss of a child, from not being able to save this baby. And where that took him, this big incident here has been a really common theme throughout his life. And that one was just a shocker. Never saw it coming for him. Instead, he'd always identified his trauma and, not feeling safe as a negative core belief. And I'm alone and I'm not safe are really different when we look at healing trauma.
Wow. Just wow. What a story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And thank you for being that person that brings out that cup of coffee, because you never know the impact that you're going to have on someone else's life. Like that's a beautiful story and a beautiful act. And it speaks volumes about who you are as a person as well. How do you avoid, or is it possible to completely avoid vicarious trauma? I mean, you're listening to so many stories that are impactful as people are pouring your heart out. And I remember EMDR as a very, very intimate process. Yeah. I mean, you're going deep for a person.
We're going deep. We are going into, we're going into the muds, and we're going to the darkest places of people's lives. So I believe wholly that being a therapist, it's not a job. I think of it really, I'm a very spiritual, very religious person. To me, it's a calling. I think, if for any of us that have any spiritual or maybe Christianity based, beliefs, in Christianity, there's a common theme that Jesus is the great counselor. And I see that time and time again in my day, in my work life. I believe that this is a calling that you're chosen for. that the resilience that I have is partially from God, but I also see the differences. And somebody phrased it to me that like this once. Another therapist, another friend, he said, Pam, have you ever lost a child before? And I said, no, I've never had a miscarriage. I've never lost a baby. And he goes, okay, my wife and I have. And I said, ooh, I'm so sorry. And he goes, right, you're sorry. He goes, you have empathy and you can imagine what it's like to have experienced that. And I said, absolutely. Like that's, to lose a child would be probably, that's my worst, my greatest fear. And so when I'm sitting with my clients in their darkest hour, I know that I've been at my darkest places and I got out of those. And here I am today. Their darkest places, they don't scare me. And so getting to be, it's honestly just so much of an honor to be chosen to be a companion in somebody's darkest time, and that the trust that you feel, like, to me, it's very healing and it's very validating of what I do. It's like, wow, this person called me.
But people have been calling on you for years. You stated it very early on in this conversation that you're the type of person that people bring their problems to.
Yeah.
And so this is something that you've been essentially your entire life. Now you just have the credentials to back it up.
Now I get paid to do it. Yeah, it's cool.
Right?
We do suffer from burnout or exhaustion sometimes. And I'm sure you can remember this from our meeting. I'm a very outgoing. I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I live in a small community where literally I go to Costco and my clients are everywhere I go. My daughter's a cheerleader at her high school, and I'll go to a high school basketball game and 10 of my clients will be sitting in the gym. And that takes a toll. Sometimes that's really exhausting. And I now find my respite and my recovery being at home, like watching probably some trashy reality TV show, or I ride my motorcycle down 101 and I get air on my face. Like, I found ways to fill my soul.
That's a beautiful thing. I have a weird, off the wall question for you.
All right, bring it. I'll make up an answer.
I would not be a good interviewer if I didn't explore this. You're the sex doctor. You are an expert. You're the sexpert.
Would you like to see my penis? Or perhaps my vulva? I mean,
well, there you go. Not many people have shown me their penis and their vulva in the same interview. So good job.
I get a lot of really, when I ask them, I'm like, oh, have you seen my penis? People are like, it's great. Or somebody will walk and they're like, is that a, and I'm like, yeah. They're like, okay. So it's fun. What do we got?
So there are a few things that intersect here. Napoleon Hill's book, very famous book, Think and Grow Rich, has a chapter where he talks about sexual transmutation. In that chapter, he goes into the topic in depth a bit, but he's really talking about how many successful people are sexualized or hypersexualized. Marrying that with, in my experience talking with people that are often traumas can build more resilient kids who turn out to be adults that address the problems that they had or faced in childhood. Like, that's a thing also. But understanding those childhood traumas, just speak for myself here, having been raped and molested as a kid, and then as an adult, having been drugged and assaulted by women, actually.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the impact of, like what Napoleon Hill is saying, with sexual transmutation, hypersexualization, the development of, in lack of a better term, just rampant sexual behaviors in adulthood to try to compensate for things that happen in childhood? Like, how in the hell do you navigate that whole
This is not a quick answer. And this is one that I personally love exploring and talking to people with. It goes deep. So what we know from research, and
That's what you said.
I love it. Good job. I am all for a good "that's what she said" joke. I can turn somebody asked me once, they were like, "What is your superpower?" And I said, "I can turn anything dirty." And they were like, "Wow." So we all have to have our gifts, right?
Yes.
So what we know from the research and this correlates with what I see in my practice. And I also am a survivor of molestation as a child, marital rape, and then the hypersexualization that you're talking about. So all of those things, those like really weave. When sexual abuse starts as a kid, in 75% of people, we will see a really shut down, decreased lack of desire because sex isn't safe for them. Okay. So therefore being sexualized could mean that they are targeted, they're a victim. It reignites all of that trauma 75% of the time. Then on the other side of things, in 25% of people, we see this hypersexualization. And so it will look like a lot of sex partners, risky sex, all these things, because, and this is where it comes from, if I am choosing to have sex in these situations, they may be risky, they may not be maybe the ideal person or ideal, relationship. I then have the illusion of control, which is the illusion of safety. So that is the quick answer. Women more than men, I see this hypersexualization, and it's leading to, well, if a guy is going to use me anyway, or if a person is going to use me anyway, I will get to them first before they can do harm to me.
That's important what you're saying there. I spent years as a sexual assault victim advocate, and oftentimes I would encounter victims that had been sexualized when they were a kid, and they were caught up in patterns of behavior. Not to say that what you wear or something like that is why you were sexually assaulted, but oftentimes they would almost attempt to replicate the situation that they had been in before to have the trauma.
And we see, actually, there's some really viable evidence and really awesome practices. So sometimes with sexual assault victims, we will see them reliving or like kind of re-engaging in behaviors very similar to their trauma in terms of BDSM or kink play. And so if a sexual assault victim was bound or tied, or obviously it's non-consensual, they will many times look to recreate that scenario as a means of wrangling that, harnessing it, and now making that memory safe because it hits a different, neurotransmitter.
Wow. And with EMDR, just for my ignorance, are you rewiring the synapses that fire off those memories?
Yeah.
Or repurposing the emotion?
Yeah. So what we are doing is we through EMDR cannot change a truth. You were molested. This is a truth. You'll never forget that. It would, it's valid for you to know that and know that your memory and your recall is true and accurate. But what we do through EMDR is we are desensitizing the pain and the emotion and how we get there. So I think of it like the heartstring, right? Like that molestation, it goes from here to here in this really specific way. So when I feel not enough or I feel victimized in this way, and it goes boom right there. Now, any time that I experience that same cognition or that feeling in my adult life, I feel that again, and it gets there super fast. So it may not be another rape, but if I was in a car accident and victimized, or if I saw something and I felt that same emotional kind of stirring, we are engaging in that again. What EMDR does is it forces our neurons and our neural network to get to that knowledge and then feeling through a new process. Okay. And when we do it here in the office and we kind of go around the block to get there, we have the safety and we know, okay, I can get there and the pain is decreased.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask, thank you for that.
Yeah.
When it comes to the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, first, I think that study is outdated. I think they need to add some more things to there.
Yes.
As a person who has been through so many of the childhood experiences, the only one that I recall that I have not been through is foster care. Looking at the impact of that study, or what was produced in that study, and the correlation between behaviors and disease development later in life, like how do you help to alleviate stresses related, like toxic stress related to childhood experiences?
Yeah.
How can a person that's considering therapy or wondering, if they should go and seek professional help, how do you assist with that?
Yeah. My answer would always be yes. If there is a pain in your life and something is hard, the answer is always yes. I can't change it. I don't do the heavy lifting in therapy. You do. And as a, kind of side note, I will tell many people, I will never work harder than my clients. And then I'll say an asterisk there. My teenagers, my young people who need somebody to help them lift heavier, man, when they call, I'm always going to show up and I'm going to bring every tool and resource and help them, like push them along the way. But for, you, for example, if you show up in my office and you're like, wow, man, I have this foster care and I carry these things, cool. We are going to deconstruct them. We're going to figure out what that meant to you then, where that meaning is coming up in your life today, what choices have informed that feeling, what you need to change. How can you be living your most authentic and your most present life? What do you need to be fulfilled and proud of where you're at? Because yes, you experienced that foster care system and it hurt. But my guess is there was probably some really hard learned lessons that came through that, right? My abusive marriage was horrible. I would never ask people to go through the things that I've gone through. That would be terrible. However, I am uniquely me because of them. And today I like me. And therefore, all of those negative experiences, they are part of me. And so finding, maybe some value in what came of that.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Thank you. It's one of the beautiful things that I experienced in therapy was the validation. Validation of so many pains and traumas. And what I find in the military, especially, is that so many people don't even realize that their upbringing was abnormal.
Yeah.
And that's a weird realization to have, that molestation should not occur in families. Incest should not occur in families. Mm-hmm. Witnessing domestic violence, witnessing your mom get the crap beat out of her, or witnessing substance abuse is not normal behavior. But for so many people, that was their normal until they're introduced to a different environment.
You probably need to tag this episode with like an explicit content warning, but I can think of a lovely client that I have, and he's in his 80s. He's an older gentleman, and he says, my dad molested me, and he would tell me about the molestation of his dad. And we got into talking about the relationship with his mom. And he's like, oh, my mom loved me. My mom taught me about sex. My mom was the one that always communicated with me. I'm like, okay, what'd she teach you? What was the message? So then he tells me that his mom would have her fondle his breasts, and her mom would have him finger her because she wanted him to learn about female anatomy and not just the abuse that he'd experienced from dad. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, friend, this is not appropriate. This is molestation. He goes, no. She's a woman. And I'm like, so much pain and damage happens. And we, the victims of that, because of generational trauma, they don't even know much of the time that you're saying with the, veterans, that this is not normal or appropriate behavior. Yeah. Wow.
That it's amazing. It amazes me how many things I've put in bento boxes. Yours is a bento box. Mine is more like the little vault thing that you put, the little thing that you put in the tube at the bank and you send it in.
Yeah.
And then my head, the the bank vault is just filled with those. I know that's just,
Yeah.
but for me, that's what you're talking. And it amazes me how many times there are things that have been put away or stored away. And it's not till you say something that something comes back out and triggers something else.
Sorry.
No. It's actually a great thing, because what I've learned to do is to, as those things come up, to identify them and acknowledge them and validate them. Like you said, they happen. They happen. And it's actually a good point, Pam, because so many people that I know walk around pretending that this thing didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with that?
So when we acknowledge it and we sit in that lake of mud and yuck and ooh and gross, we take the power from it. Okay. Sometimes it means we have to sit there for a little while and be spun out and be like, and beep this if you have to. We'll be like, what the fuck, right? How did that happen? How was no one looking out for me? I was victimized by a member of a police department when I was 7 years old. And I sit back and I think about this later and I'm like, holy crap. Here's our checks and balances. Where was I at in this? And it's okay to sit back and be really struck with that. And when you are ready to jump on your raft and row out of that lake of pain and shame, you do it. Okay. And you acknowledge like, wow, the shore is right there. I'm going to get there. But today I need to rest up so that I can start rowing.
You mentioned taking the power away, and that's a beautiful thing when you acknowledge it and validate that these things happen. So yeah, again, success leaves clues. And here you are, this awesome expert on this, because I've often counseled people, not as a therapist, but to be able to say, listen, as long as it's in the closet, it has control or power over you, because you have to stand guard at the closet door.
Yep.
And that's an extra pressure that you have versus, now I don't recommend people do what I did, which was to post this post on Facebook and just
throw it. Yeah. I saw your skeletons post, right? Like just throw it all out there. We're not all there. Yeah, we're not all there. But when you do that, holy cow, how freeing, right?
I gained my ability to look in the mirror for myself, because I opened the closet doors, and no one that had held anything over me before could hold it anymore. But also what I realized is that I had been emotionally blackmailing myself.
Yep.
Right. I had been holding myself hostage and unable to. Let me shut up, because you were about to say something.
No, we are the meanest to ourselves. Nobody else can do to me what I can do to me, right? We would not give anybody in our lives the power to do that, but we are really terrible to ourselves. And by you doing that, you saying, here's my dirty laundry, here's my worst day.
You know, it's amazing that I haven't found anybody yet that walks on water.
No, but you know what? We all put our pants on the same. We sin different ways. It is literally the same.
But so many people go through life thinking that everyone else has it different, that they're held at a different level, their life is more put together. But the more conversations I have with people, the more I realize, Pam, just what you said, the truth in that. We all put our pants on the same way. We all have different experiences. Maybe you weren't molested as a kid, but maybe you went through this as a child or as an adult. And it has helped me to be in a position where I know pastors who are gay and are having an affairs on their wife, professionals who are experts at BDSM and all this type of thing. And people can listen to this and judge, right? Yeah. They can judge me or judge whoever but truly every single person that I've ever met has a past and they have something. And it seems like people just want to be accepted for who they are.
We all just want, we want to feel cared for and seen. We're not made to be alone. People need people. And when we can accept our faults and see flaws and move past those, then we build community. When we're here together for the same reason and the same mission, we're getting somewhere.
Let me ask you, you may be uniquely positioned to, at least of all the guests that I've had, how do you balance between what you identify as a flaw, what you identify as a sin, and what you identify as a character trait. Like, this is just who I am.
I would really have to think about that. Could be a whole episode in itself that I would need to like think about and deconstruct. I think my quick judgment and my quick reaction is going to be a matter of your own judgments, your biases, right? For some people and their religion, having alcohol, no problem, right? You're not using and abusing alcohol, and other people, it's a problem. For some religions and cultures, having multiple wives is not a problem. For some, it is. So I think there's a lot. We know, people inherently know when they're doing something wrong, when they're doing something that is shady. And so we are the best guide, as long as you're not, a sociopath, if you're living on the up and up. If somebody was with you every moment of your day watching, what would they think?
That's a scary thought.
It's a thought.
Big Brother's with you all the time.
Big Brother is, yeah, right?
If you could wave a wand and God will give you anything you ask for, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. What would it be? My default is always money, because money, it provides that security. It's like, what could I do with money? The treatment centers I could open, or the facilities I could open, or the, things. Not the illusion that would bring or buy happiness, but it seems like that would be the answer to touching and healing more people, which would be my motivation. I am really blessed and thankful to say at this stage of my life, I'm really happy. Things are really great. So the wand would be waved to help and further other people and communities and populations that need it more. I've worked really hard and I've done a lot. So now who can we help? How can we teach them to help themselves, to be fishers, to catch the fish?
I feel like a good, because I feel like I knew your answer.
That's what it would be. How can I show up for more people? Because right now I can show up for my little section of the world, or my little section of Oregon.
You know what, though? I just want to be clear before we wrap this thing up that is enough. You are enough, and you're doing amazing things to change people's lives. The impact that you're having already, just in what you're calling your little community, is huge. You said something earlier about going to a basketball game and seeing 4 or 5 of your clients sitting there. Well, that demonstrates to you that you are having a meaningful impact on the community. So Let me give you those flowers.
I have the best people, and I'm so fortunate to get to be working with the people that I am working with, and, interacting with those that I have. So pretty awesome. Thank you so much for having me here today.
No worries. I have 2 final questions for you. One, where can people contact you?
Sure. I have a website. It's www.livewelloregon.org. That's my website. You can learn more about me, my practice. They can give me a call or send me an email. Text messages are probably the best way. I kind of hate talking on the phone these days. 503-468-6964 is my business cell, or pam@pamthecounselor.com. Given that I have a weird spelling on my first name and my last name, it was a great way to help people remember how to find me. So
pamthecounselor.com. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Live Well Oregon.
Yep.
Right? Okay, liveweloregon.com. Final question.
.org.
.org. Sorry.
Anyway.
Final question.
If you Google Pam Barela, I think I'm the only one that shows up. So.
Okay.
Final
if
question.
This were the final time that you and I talked, or it was the only time that someone from our audience got to hear you speak, what would you want us to walk away with?
I think, this is going to hit me. The thing that I wish that somebody had told me, or that I'd learned sooner, was love yourself first. I don't care what anybody else has ever said to you, because they are bullies and they're assholes. Love yourself. You're worth it. So that's what I would tell other people. And if it was the last time we talked, I would say, Derek, I love you to death. And when I think of our friendship and how it has transpired all the years, Can I tell a funny and embarrassing story really quick?
Go for it.
I think of the time, my favorite phone call with you was probably a call that we talked for hours and hours, and you were driving through Arkansas, I think, and you were lost. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Go for it.
And you were like, okay, hold on, stay with me. I'm lost. I need to run in and go grab directions. I'm like, okay, call me back. And you're like, Pam, no. Pam, no. And I'm like, what? And you go, I am a speck of pepper in a sea of salt. Stay on the phone with me here. And
True
my
story.
friend, I love you so much for that. And I think that I learned so much from you on that day. So that would be the heartwarming. You really helped me to see other people. And not that I don't see other people, but there have been multiple instances in our friendship where I think you have helped me to see other people better.
And I want you to know before this podcast ends that you met me at a time when I was considering ending my life, where I had no purpose. And you and I had joked that our partners, our spouses should have married each other. Many people, that there's an extra pressure that was in my life because, my wife had cancer. And so the priority was her, and this is what the public perception was all about. And the fact that somebody is dying or has a terminal illness automatically makes them, higher elevated than you are. So you met me at a time where I was battling with some demons, and you stuck by me, and I appreciate that through everything. So
Friends for
thank you
life.
very much for your time. Friends for life. Absolutely. I appreciate you. And I know some of my clients that are going to listen to you and probably reach out to you to say hello because you're impactful. Thank you so much.
I would love to meet you all, and I welcome the phone calls or texts or emails or whatever. Derek's friends are my friends.
Beautiful. All right. Dr. Pamela Barela, thank you for your time.
Thank you.